Welcome back to the Contacts Coaching Podcast. We are joined today by the man himself, Justin Ferdinand, from one of the many Junipero Serra schools in the nation, at least three in California we just discussed, but the only one in San Mateo, California. Coach, thanks for being here today.
Absolutely. My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Yep, it's been a while of recruitment, but we finally got you signed, sealed, and delivered. So here we go. We're going to take a minute. I'm going to let you take as long as you need to ground the audience, give them your backstory. How did we arrive at Serra? What were the stops before that? What were the starts and stops and fits along the way? What was the high school career, the college career? All of that until we got to November the 20th, 2025 in the Common Era.
Okay. Let's see. Grew up in San Ramon, California. Proud graduate of California High School, home of the Grizzlies. Played water polo and swam for 4 years at Cal High, and then went on and played Division II college water polo at Chaminade University, which is crazy enough on the island of Oahu, not the island of Maui, although Chaminade is notorious and known for hosting the Maui Invitational, which actually is probably the highest rated preseason college basketball tournament in the country, if you ask anybody that watches college basketball. But yeah, the school is actually on Oahu, and played 4 years of Division II water polo. And my junior year of college, had a friend of mine who was a high school teacher at Kamehameha Schools, which is one of the prestigious private schools on Oahu. And he approached me and said, "Hey, I need a JV water polo coach. Would you be interested?" I said, "Yeah, sure. Tell me more." College guy, needed money, thought that knew enough about water polo, didn't know anything about coaching, but I was like, sure, why not? Sounds great. Junior year of college is when I started my high school coaching career, and had a great time coaching in Hawaii for 2 years. Graduated in 1999, and then in 2000 ended up moving down to Southern California, moved to Mission Viejo, and started coaching and teaching at the high school level in Southern California in 2000. Coached boys and girls water polo and swimming until 2017. And actually, taking a step back, in 2008, decided to go and get my master's in coaching and athletic administration from Concordia University in Irvine. I think I was one
Long
of the...
commute there.
What?
I said it's a long commute from where you were.
Nah, it was great. It was awesome. It was great because this was pre-online classes, so we actually did classes in person. So met some phenomenal coaches and athletic directors throughout that program. I think I was the second or third graduating class for that program ever. And so graduated in 2010 with my master's, and then started looking for positions. In 2017, came back to Northern California to take over as the athletic director at Half Moon Bay High School. Was the athletic director, water polo coach, special education teacher, all the above that was 2012. See, I got all my dates wrong. Sorry. And then, so started in 2012, and then in 2017, heard that the athletic director at Serra was stepping down. So I figured just throw my name in and see what happens. And lo and behold, here we are 7 years later as the athletic director at Serra.
There we go. What high school in Mission Viejo before you left?
So I was actually, crazy enough, I was coaching boys water polo at Aliso Niguel High School, and I was coaching girls water polo at Mission Viejo.
Okay.
And because they're in different seasons in Southern California, so you're able to do both. And I was actually teaching at Aliso Niguel High School.
Love it. Love it.
Yep.
It's funny the timeline. So we pretty much are, I think I'm a year older than you, graduated a year before you, did my master's program at the exact same time through San Jose State at a cohort like you're talking about. which was way better than this online stuff that's going on because you get to be around humans.
Yep.
But all of that to say, let's go back to Hawaii for a second. And so you're a public school guy. You go to Chaminade, which is private, which is fine, no big deal. There's only like 30 Division II schools in the country to play polo at, right?
Yes. Yep.
So what's that schedule like when you're at Chaminade? And like, who are you playing? Like, what's the travel schedule like?
So it was crazy that the only teams that would come to Hawaii to play us were like Stanford and UCLA, right? So we're getting these not preseason games against Stanford and UCLA, and they're just coming and just absolutely annihilating us. And then all of our travel was to the West Coast. So we would take 10 to 12 days and travel from Hawaii to Southern California or Northern California to basically play in a tournament and then play 3 or 4 games in the course of week and a half or 10 days and then fly back. And again, this is all pre online learning. So, it's crazy that we were like given these big, huge stacks of papers and having to take all of our books and stuff with us so that we could study while we were gone the best we possibly could.
Interesting. The other thing that I'm curious about is and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Chaminade sits like they share a boundary with St. Louis High School, right?
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So you got St. Louis High School next to you, and you cut your teeth at Kamehameha, and then you end up going back to a traditional kind of public school world. As you reflect now, being back in the private school, do you ever think back and go, wow, I took this big detour just to get back here? And what are your thoughts on your journey as you look back, thinking you actually cut your teeth in the private school world with a similar school to you right next door?
Yeah, so it's crazy. And I think it was good now as a dad because I grew up in the public school system. My wife grew up in the public school system, but both of our children went through the private school system. And so we've done both. So I think being able to see both and be a part of both. Now, when I was at Kamehameha, all I was doing was coaching. I wasn't doing anything else, right? I wasn't teaching. So I really didn't fully ingrain myself in the school. I would literally show up after school. I'm one of those off-campus guys. You show up, you run 2 hours of practice, and you're out. So that's basically what it was. So I really didn't get a clear picture of what it was like to be a part of a private school community. And then going back to public school and teaching at the public school for as long as I did, like it's amazing. It's great. There's tons of support, but now being in the private school, it's very different.
It is. And I don't say that to uplift or tear down either side of things. I cut my teeth teaching public school for 10 years before I did all boys Catholic. And then I've been in independent school for 16 years. But it's interesting, right? As you sit here as a seasoned vet now, and we may have some younger people listening to this, like what advice would you give them if you could give it to yourself where you're at Kamehameha and you're just on campus, off campus versus, I need to look around a little bit and see what doors can open because there's many of our younger sisters and brethren that are cutting their teeth in this and probably doing the same thing, not really realizing the opportunities that are around them and they can't see the forest for the trees.
Yeah, 100%. I think going back, I would have really liked to have had the opportunity to figure a way to ingrain myself in the school, whether that be a part-time position or just finding the time to spend more time with the kids. I think that's the biggest thing is as an off-campus coach, you really don't get to see the kids outside of that one single environment. But when you're at school with them, when you see them throughout the day, you get to interact with them in a different environment and see them in a different light. And it really helps shape how you as a coach view them as they go through their day and as they go through their year. So I think it would have been great. And I think it would have given me a different perspective way back in the day. And maybe I would have been a different coach had I seen those kids during the school day.
Yeah, maybe not. But at the end of the day, I think you have people that are now coaching for you that we can offer this same wisdom to. When I hire my college kids to come on here and coach, it's, look around, meet people, doors will open, don't just show up and leave. And I think the whole purpose of it is I usually ask what you need to figure out when you took over as the head coach, which years ago for you, and maybe you remember some of those things, but more from your AD lens as you're onboarding new coaches, as you're thinking about the ways in which we try to support people, what are some of those things that people need to know when they're taking over that maybe they didn't think about when it's, oh yeah, I'm just excited to show up and coach, and I don't even know about the 95% of these things that have nothing to do with coaching.
Correct. I think that's the biggest thing, right? Is having them understand that there's a huge piece of that puzzle that has nothing to do with the X's and O's, that has nothing to do with putting together lineups and practice plans and everything that comes into play when what I consider to be all the fun stuff, right? Like being out there and blowing the whistle and moving kids around and that kind of stuff. And there's a huge piece of it that really a lot of these individuals have no idea that, yeah, you have to put together team parent guidelines. You got to put together policies and procedures and expectations, and you got to have meetings with parents, and you've got to know from the administration what's allowed, what's not allowed. You've got to know what your budget is and how much money you can spend, and that you don't just have a blank check to be able to spend as much as you want. Like all these things that you really don't get a chance to think about until you enter into that head coaching position, how much else is out there.
Let's take that thought process and apply it to your own journey into admin. So 2012, you go from being a coach at two different schools, you're teaching at one, you're doing all the normal things that we do as public school teachers and coaches, classroom coach, and you leave and you move into an administrative job and you're still doing both. But what did you realize then in a similar capacity that was new? It's like, oh, I got this. I got a degree. I got all of this, right? What are some of those things that you still remember where it was just like, oh, wow, man, I wasn't ready for this?
I would say probably just the time demand on it, to be honest with you. When I started at Half Moon Bay, I was literally in my office at 6:30 in the morning trying to pound out an hour and a half of work before the school day started, and then going from being an AD to being a teacher from 8 o'clock until 2 o'clock. And maybe at lunch, you get to blast off a couple of emails if you're lucky. And then when the school day ended, it was all being an athletic director. So I think the time management part was a big adjustment for me. And then I would say the other thing is just the breadth of administrative responsibilities that are a part of it, that are, you have to be in it, and it's not stuff that you can just open up a book and learn from. It's just on the job training that you get. Like prime example, year one as AD at Half Moon Bay, first home football game of the season, right? JV game starts at 4, varsity starts at 7. It's about 3:45, and coaches come up and they're like, where's the officials? I'm like, we're good, right? They're like, no, did you check arbiter? And I was like, what's arbiter? Right? Go back, look at arbiter, and arbiter had 4:30 and 7:30 as the start times. So
at least it was in there. It could have been worse.
It could have been way worse. It could have been way worse. At least it was there, and the previous administration had put it in at the wrong time, and wasn't even on my radar to even look at that. That's the thing where on-the-job training is a big part of it.
So good. All right, so you're there, and obviously Half Moon Bay has a ton of success historically as an athletic school. They're isolated by themselves over their local community. At some point, you know everybody, right? And then pivoting and going to Sarah, which is a whole different beast. What was that transition like? What were you able to bring with you? What did you realize, yo, this ain't gonna work here, and I need to reimagine how I do this job?
Crazy enough is there wasn't a lot, I think, because there's that same sense of community here that we had at Half Moon Bay, right? And there's this huge piece. I think the biggest difference that I really had to dive into, that I probably didn't do well enough at Half Moon Bay, was diving into the alumni community, right? The alumni community at Sarah is huge, and they're grateful to be a Padre. They're a Padre for life. And we pull coaches from that. We pull, obviously, fundraising and donations from that as well. But I think So that was one of the things I learned that I wish I had done at Half Moon Bay, because they have that same kind of community feel, that community aspect. Other than that, I think one of the things that I pride myself on while I was at Half Moon Bay was trying to create as much equity among all the sports, male and female, so that everyone felt as important as the next. And that has seemed to be a bit difficult here, and only because success breeds that recognition. And so if your programs don't have the success, it becomes that much more difficult. And so I think trying to learn how to develop and create that equity amongst programs when they're not as successful as some of the others is difficult, and something that I've had to kind of learn as I go along.
I would imagine it's also much more challenging as a member of the West Catholic Athletic League than, and I don't even remember what Half Moon Bay is in, but Half Moon Bay is, for all intents and purposes, and correct me if I'm wrong here, like one of the better comprehensive athletic programs in that league that they're in. So you're decent or good at everything. And then the West Catholic, right, other than the Trinity League down south, you guys are the tip of the spear in regards to athletics in the state of California. And as an outsider looking in, I'm curious what your take will be on this, but my observation is okay, Mitty's good at girls basketball and boys basketball. Sarah's good at football. SI's good at lacrosse. And while the other programs will have some ups and some downs, it's almost as if each of those schools has carved out their niche, and this is where we're going to push our chips in. And I'm not going to say to hell with everyone else, but like they're not at the front of the train. I could be completely wrong, but I'd love your take on that and how that factors in to your attempts to build equity and to build sustainability when that seems to be what's going on.
Yeah, no, it's definitely like any outsider is going to view it in that sense, right? And every program has its cycle and its ups and downs, even in our league, where a lot of people will say, how can you? Because you're bringing in X number of players every single year, but that's not for every program that we offer, right? That's for certain programs. So I think it is difficult to do that. And so I think what I've tried to do is take it from a boots on the ground kind of mentality of, okay, if we're not going to get the outside recognition from local media and this, that, and what have you, then we have to be able to create that internally. So what are we doing to do that? Because yeah, we have programs. Our baseball program won CCS last year, right? Lacrosse is on an upward trajectory, but no, track and cross country they're stagnant, right? Like they're middle of the road within our league and within the section. So we have to find ways internally to celebrate them in a way that can help elevate that.
I'm also curious about access. And I think you told me you guys have 800 kids, maybe more than that.
Yeah.
But when you have, I'm going to use the word success very loosely, right? But again, in the league you're in, everything's competitive, right? And you can't just show up and be a participant for all intents and purposes. You have 800 kids, you have whatever, 25 sports, teams at each of these levels. Like what percentage of the population plays, if you know that?
Yeah.
Something. And then what percentage are just left out in the cold due to the youth sports industrial complex's push of specialization and some of these other things that didn't exist when we were growing up and people could try to find a way onto a team? Like, how are you navigating that when your school competes at such a high level?
It's a great question. It's a very delicate kind of process, I think, if for lack of a better term. I mean, we have 860 all boys. The last I checked, numbers wise, we have about 87% participation.
That's really good.
Which is great. And some of that is single sport, some of that is multi-sport, like it's all across the board, right? We don't have the tri-sport athletes that we used to have, the football, basketball, baseball. We don't have those guys. We have some. We have a ton of dual sport athletes, but at the same token, we have certain sports that are a lot more difficult to get into, right? Baseball, soccer, basketball are the top three that come to mind. And with those, the kids that don't make it, we do everything we possibly can to provide them with other opportunities, whether that be as a team manager, as practice players, as we hold out spots in other programs, like we have spots in wrestling for kids that didn't make basketball. Those types of areas. If a kid doesn't make baseball, they can go to track. There's these other opportunities that are presented to hopefully keep that number at 87% so that we're not losing participation because these kids are singularly focused on, I'm a basketball player, and if I don't make the basketball team, I got nothing else.
Yeah. Well, that number is huge. And especially at an all boys school, that's really impressive. We're at 83%, and we have like obligatory co-curricular participation, right? So they have to do something. Whereas at yours, you don't have that. You have all boys, which tips the scale, and you still get to almost 90% of them. That's awesome. Good for you guys.
Yeah, thank you.
And I'd be amazed to pick your brain later on how you're able to do that. Like, how many sports do you have? How many levels do you have? Does that play a role? Do you have the traditional other co-curriculars at the school, theater, band, all those other things that kids can do?
Yeah.
Because I would imagine that number gets higher than 87 if you're counting those. And that they're doing those things. Yeah. So that's cool, man. Good job.
Yeah. And we, just to add on, we've had kids who have done theater and played a varsity sport at the same time, which in my mind is crazy. That's even a possibility, but we've gotten to the point where our coaches feel comfortable having conversations with the theater director and vice versa to be able to come up with a plan to allow that kid or kids to be able to participate and do both.
Do you have anything, as you mentioned, some schools are harder to get into? I use the word impacted. So like for us, it's golf, right? Obviously, it's tennis at times. And we won the state title in golf last year. We just finished third on the girls' side yesterday. And it's, hey, I want to play golf at your school. It's, what's your index? Huh? Yeah, you're not playing golf here. Do you have programs at your school that have gotten to that point where it's almost hard and you have to filter because as a private school, right, people are recruiting themselves to your institution, right? They're trying to come there. They're going through the process. Is this going to be a fit? And for us, it's golf. Like, I got to break hearts before kids even apply. I don't know what it's like for you, but is there any of that going on your end?
100%. But some of those sports, actually, funny you say golf, because we saw the biggest boom in participation in boys golf post-COVID as any other sport.
That's all they could do at COVID.
Exactly. It's all you could do. So now all they want to do is play golf. So we actually created a third team, right? We hired another
We did
coach.
the same thing.
Hired another coach, created a third team that was quote unquote JV development, had their own schedule, did their own thing, but it was great. And now it's gotten to the point where we're not going to create four golf teams. That's ridiculous. The green fees alone would not be something my CFO would be open to, but we are getting to that point where we have kids coming in as freshmen that are like, here's my handicap, here's what I can do, here's what all these tournaments that I've been in, and that's where we're going.
Yeah, and it's the nice thing about golf is it's a meritocracy. We're going to go qualify and we're going to find out. So you can have your index, you can have your tournament resume. At the end of the day, we're going to go find out. The tricky thing, to your point, is you're limited by numbers, and we had to do the same thing where we have a JV2, but you can't go deeper than that because there's nobody to play. So it's like you can have your own schedule, but who are you playing? And so I love that you've done that. That's awesome. What would you say is the best thing you do in your program? And usually I ask if you tapped out and went back down south and went to another spot that you would bring with you. But in your case, I'd love to know that. But I'm also more curious about what's the separator between, say, you and the other 7 schools in the West Catholic that you can point to and be like, yo, this is the best thing we do and this is why we're different?
I would say, and again, I haven't polled the other schools, so I have no idea. Some of them may be doing the same thing. We we've worked really hard to enhance and develop and promote the idea of brotherhood. And it's been around for here at Sarah forever, but I don't know that it's ever been a part of every athletic program that we offer here. And so the coaches talk about it on a regular basis. We have programs that will host chapels with the school chaplain on a regular basis to talk about nothing that relates to their sport, but everything that relates to who they are as a person and how they interact as teammates. So again, I'm sure every school out there does this in some capacity, but I would say that the brotherhood aspect of who we are could be something that separates us.
So what does that mean? And I asked that after spending 2 years at Palma, where again, you'll talk about all boys education, you'll talk about leadership, you talk about brotherhood. You're doing the same thing at your place, right? Because the all boys environment's a little bit different. And there's a certain, oh boy, locker room aspect to that. There's a certain Eddie Haskell aspect to that, right? There's a certain, yeah, we're brothers. In my house with multiple brothers, you're punching each other in the mouth behind. So it's like, how do you take the positives of that and hit away from the negatives that come with that as you try to cultivate that culture?
I think we bring it back to the faith-centered piece, I think is what and I use our football program as an example, right? They will go to battle with each other and for each other, and then they're going to pray together. They're going to break bread together on a daily basis. So it's that whole piece of we're going to go to battle together. We're going to be in the trenches right next to each other. But no matter what happens, I'm going to love that person as I love my brother through the good times and the bad. I know it's
not. It's hard to conceptualize, and that's
hard.
why I asked, and
Yeah.
I'm sorry I put you on the
No,
spot.
it's fine.
But it's part of that. You're trying to lean on the best aspects of that while filtering out the ones that you know are inevitably going to come up as well.
100%. Yeah.
And I love that for you guys. That's great. Okay. As the AD, right? You get out of coaching right now. You're not coaching. You finally get a chance to roll around and just watch everybody. What have you learned? What have you stolen watching other programs and offered to others? Because traditionally, like as an aquatics guy, you probably spent your life watching water polo coaches, watching aquatics coaches, and now all of a sudden you're watching the basketball coach, you're watching the football coach, and it's like, shit, if I coach again, this is a really cool concept that I want to steal. And I think in the era of specialization, we have to be even more vigilant at helping people widen the perspective. So I'm always asking this question about what you can offer that has become clear to you as you've moved further away from the deck, so to speak, about the transferability between disciplines.
Oof. I would say the one thing, and again, when I ran practices, when I was coaching, it was we're going to practice until we get it right. And if that means we're going to practice for 4 hours, then we're going to practice for 4 hours, but we're going to make sure that we get it right. And I think one of the things that I've learned in my time is that at a certain point, you lose kids mentally and physically. And so to continue to go down that path, I feel as though now we can accomplish as coaches just as much in an hour and a half as we can in 3 hours.
Preach.
Like, I feel like the issue becomes, and this is something that I talk to my coaches about all the time, is that in order to do that effectively, you have to plan ahead. You have to know exactly, like, your practice plan has to be so detailed that there's not a piece that's going to go missing because you're now shortening the amount of time, but that allows the kids to stay focused, they stay engaged. Because again, I think the biggest thing that we sometimes forget is they've been sitting in a classroom for 6 or 7 hours. And then they're going to the practice field, and the expectation is that we're going to get another 2 to 2.5 hours of 100% engagement. It's not possible.
No, I go 90 minutes and I'm trying to get 90 minutes out of them. And it's funny, like, how you can take that framework, and I've been saying that for a handful of years, not that I'm really good at what I do, but it's, if you can't get it done in 90 minutes, you need to get better. And what you lose, and this was my realization the other day, especially as a school that is super reliant on the multi-sport kid, on the athlete that isn't really playing basketball outside of the season. So you're trying to build skill work into basketball, but once you cut down to 90 minutes, like, that almost goes out the window. So it's, what are you sacrificing? And then the other thing that is fascinating that I'm curious to get your take on, if you think about your own coaching career, is each team is unique. Even if you want to apply the same scheme, where I've gotten to the point with this year's group where it's, I can't do teaching. I can't do breakdown stuff or I lose them. We just got to be like playing the whole time and trying our best to teach out of that. Where I've had other teams where you can do a lot of part stuff, which then transfers. Like, whatever I try to do small side, like teaching, it doesn't transfer. So I'm like, I told my assistants, I'm like, when I hand you the practice plan and it has a lot of breakdown, just ask me what the hell you're doing, because ultimately it ain't going to work. I don't know what your take on that is, but this year has been so eye-opening to me that it's just like, we have to just figure out how to play.
Yeah, I think it's super key to understand that how does your team operate in that capacity? Because I've had the same thing, right? Like, I've had teams who you break it down and you could break it down into very small, finite pieces in practice, and then they just instinctually are able to figure it out and put it all together when the game happens. And then you have other teams where you try and do the same thing and you get to a game and it doesn't work out exactly as it's supposed to. And it's like, boom, everything just blows up. And now no one has a clue what they're supposed to be doing. And so I think I think that's huge.
I'm going to pivot for a second because I meant to ask this earlier. One of the other outside observations I have about schools like yours, specifically, right, West Catholic, Palma, De La Salle, Jesuit, right, all those types where like sports is super important to keeping the doors open, that the pressure cauldron ramps up. And so I was curious what your take was, not that it wasn't pressure filled down south in your sport, but at the school, it definitely wasn't. And at Half Moon Bay Community School, it's a different vibe than, say, being at Cal High. But at your school, at Midi, at St. Francis, at Valley, it's, yo, there is an expectation about certain things. And if that doesn't happen, go kick rocks. It's almost like college. So what's that been like? And how do you navigate? Not that we don't want to live up to expectations, but it's very different than teaching and coaching at the public school, where as long as you're not doing something egregious, like, your job security is pretty good.
Yeah, I think it's funny because jokingly, I've had conversations with coaches and I've been like, hey, coach, understand, like, your job security is not reliant on how many wins or losses you have or how many championship banners we put up in the gym, right? Because ultimately it's not. Because again, we're talking about educationally based athletics. We're talking about creating an experience for these kids, right? And my philosophy from the athletic department is, how do we create that experience and what does that experience feel like? Because in my mind, if the experience is good and the coaching is good and the expectations are there, then the success is going to be a byproduct of that. And as opposed to focusing solely on what does the scoreboard look like and what is the success, the success look like. But at the same time, yes, is there pressure? 100%. And I think how we try and navigate that is trying to figure out, like, ways to, again, market the program to the greater community that showcases what they've done. And maybe that's not championships or those types of things. That's my office is right next to the locker room.
Oh, it just hit mine. I didn't hear yours. They're replacing lights in here and something just crashed on my roof.
Like, dude, the varsity football locker room is right next to my office and school just got out. So yeah, good times.
Keep going on that track.
Yeah, so I think like certain programs do some really cool things, right? Cross country takes a whole day and they go and they clean and they prep Crystal Springs, right? And then regardless of how their season goes, that's something that we can hang our hat on. There are other pieces to being a part of the program. And so I think there's that piece too, to be able to understand that like being a part of this team, yeah, maybe we don't put a banner up in the gym, but you're going to feel a different way.
Yeah.
It's going to make you feel different. And that's what we want.
It's a delicate balance that you have to reach, especially at a place like yours, where there is these outside expectations, but like you're setting it up that this is about the experience. And if we do all of these things, we should find success. And sometimes we may need to redefine what success looks like in a particular program, in a particular space, especially in a league like you're in, where there are certain bullies on the block that like, unless something demonstrably changes, like it is what it is.
Yep.
So I appreciate your transparency on that. As an AD, and I don't know how often you make it to the conferences and the LTI classes and all of that, but I come back every single time and I'm just like, what am I doing? I just read this. I got this whole handbook full of legal cases. I don't want to do this. Anyway, all of that to say, one of the things I'm curious about, right, is like today, right, and what we're dealing with, like what keeps you up at night?
All of those things, right? Like I hate to say it, and I talk to my coaches every single season that we have coaches meetings, is like, guys, there's so much liability associated with what we do that, and everything's on film, right? So you can't get away from it. So it's so important that we are laser focused on how we operate, right? And no, you can't just open up the gym and let the basketball team shoot baskets when you're not in there. And you can't just hand your keys to the locker room so those guys can go in and get changed. And then they bring, like, that's the kind of stuff that obviously the coaches are like, yeah, whatever, not a big deal. But I'm like, no, it is a big deal, because if something happens, it's our livelihood that's on the line, right? And so that legal class, that LTI legal class, I literally was like, I don't know. And thankfully, knock on wood, nothing has happened, but just the risk piece of it, I think, is a huge part.
And to what you just said, right? We come out of there and we're just like, God help me, what am I doing? And you go back to when you first started, let's say at Chaminade or even in SoCal, where you're coaching and a basketball coach, right? I got guys doing loose ball drills and charge drills and all this stuff. And we're going to show how tough we are and all this other stuff. And I walk into the gym now at a basketball camp that my son's going to, and I'm looking at the bleachers, the way they have them set up, and I'm telling the director, yo, man, this pole right here is about to get you sued. What are you talking about? I'm like, listen, man, I'm sorry I'm overstepping, but like this scares the shit out of me. And it's funny how your lens shifts to where coaching your sport, like, almost doesn't even become about that anymore. It's just like risk management.
100%. Like literally my wife gives me a hard time because every time we walk into a gym, like I'm literally like looking around. Okay, where are the exits? Do they have an emergency action plan? Where's the AED? All of these things that no one else has an inclination about. And I'm like laser focused on those types of things. And she's, what are you doing? I'm like, oh, I just got to get a lay of the land, because you just don't know, right?
You don't know. You don't know.
You don't know. Yeah.
Yeah. On that note, so this morning at our AD meeting at the league, At the very end, we had a conversation about essentially sportsmanship, right? And kids getting ejected this year. And we had an inordinate amount. We have 32 teams in the league. And over all fall sports, I think we had something like 27 ejections. Last year we had six. So McCarthy's pissed about it, as he should be. 16 of the 33 schools are involved. And we're talking about, hey, what's going on? Why is this happening? How can we work with this? And I'm sitting there going, I don't have this problem. That shit doesn't happen at my school. And it's like, I'm curious, right? Because again, you guys are playing at a whole different level where you get some of the college noise in there, you get some of the other stuff that just naturally is going to come in. How do you set the standard at your school with your coaches, with your athletes? And then what have you found to be successful in tamping some of that stuff down at a league level, at an institution level, at a section level? Because it's something we're wrestling with right now that we walked out of there kind of going, we only have so much control as the AD. The principals only have so much control as the principals. I'm just curious where y'all are at with that.
So a couple of things. One is like from my standpoint to the coaches, anytime I meet with the coaches, the first thing we talk about is team culture and sportsmanship, right? What are we doing? How are we attacking this, right? So that's the first piece. We talk about it. Our team captains talk about it, but again, it's all talk, right? And again, knock on wood, we haven't had any major sportsmanship issues as of yet. I will say within our league, for the most part, there is a tremendous amount of respect amongst all the schools. And one of the ways that we've enhanced that is we have league-wide sportsmanship summits that we host throughout the course of the year. So we have one in the fall, one in the winter, and one in the spring, where we bring in the team captain or a team representative from each school, from each sport, and they sit at a table and they talk about this kind of stuff. And then we bring in the student leaders from all of those schools, and they go off and they talk about sportsmanship as a spectator, right? As a student spectator. So that's a big thing that and I applaud Jolene on this one because this was her idea. And I think it's really helped to kind of start the conversation and keep the conversation going. And again, I think that's all we can do really is just continue to have the conversation and continue to talk about it. And then again, if something happens, you got to nip it in the bud, like program wide the moment it happens, right? So if our boys soccer team gets a red card, and not a red card because it's just pace of play during the course of play or a double yellow.
No, behavioral red card.
If there's a behavioral red card, I'm going to each coach of each level and telling them that this needs to be addressed program wide, not just with that particular team. Because what if the JV team was watching the varsity game? What if the freshman team was watching JVs? If they're there, even if they're not there, they need to know that this is happening, and that's just not who we are, and that's not what we represent.
Yeah, and I also think that at places like ours, we have a little bit more traction because of the way in which we operate on the campus. Like I can sit there, I'm on the sideline in football, navigating that, right? I'm in the gym during games and just seeing somebody whistle at them and tell them to cut it out. Whereas if you're at a big comprehensive high school, you might not know half the kids. Whereas like I know everybody. And so there's a little different thing there, but have you seen transferability from the sportsmanship summit, or is it more just like we want to introduce kids to each other so they know who they're playing against?
I think it's a combination of both. I think there's a little bit of both there. I think one, yes, it creates some familiarity between the schools and between the athletes, but I think also too does create even a small tiny bit. It creates a little bit of that culture of, yes, we can compete super hard on the field, but we're still quote unquote on the same team because we're in the same league.
I think it's funny, something novel that we have to do where when we were growing up, especially where you're at in the East Bay, I grew up here and we're playing against our rival school and then we're going out to eat together because we all grew up together.
Yeah.
And so it's like we almost have to manufacture that now because kids don't interact the same way they once did in real life. whereas it's more digital than it is where you actually are spending time with these people.
100%. Yeah. 100%.
Interesting. All right, let's wrap with this. And the framing of it is always we live in a very polarized world that puts us in echo chambers, which just validate our thinking. And I'm always curious how we intentionally challenge our belief system when we are not afforded the opportunity to do that on a day in, day out basis. So the question, what have you most recently changed your mind on? Doesn't have to be sports related, but it's no, I examined my belief on this. I used to be dug in over here, and now I'm over here. And here's why. Because I think as leaders, we have to model that behavior. For 25 years, I've done this, and it's cool. Does that still mean it makes sense? Like, how are you challenging your beliefs? So curious there, coach.
Ooh, that's a loaded question.
100%. And that's why I don't want to paint you into a corner on it has to be sports. It could be about parenting, it could be about being a colleague, like whatever. Just something that's, yo, I used to believe this and now I'm over here.
I'm gonna go down that road. I'm gonna go down that parenting road, right? When my kids were young, I was always like, they have to be involved in everything they possibly can be, right? Because that's what is going to ultimately make them a well-rounded person when they grow up.
Keep them busy, they stay out of trouble too.
Doesn't work. Okay. All it does is it goes the opposite direction and it makes them compartmentalize everything and only take a certain percentage of all these different things. Right. So what I've now allowed hey, you want to play one sport and focus on that one sport? Great. That's totally, would I love you to play multiple sports? Sure. But if that's not where your heart's at, then you got to do what's in the best interest of you as an individual and what's going to bring you the most amount of joy instead of forcing yourself because dad wants you to. And now you're only 60% of your heart is in this and 40% of your heart is in that, right? So again, letting the kids just, I don't want to say run with it, but letting them focus on what they want to focus on instead of having to do it all.
Love that. How old are the kids?
So my daughter is 18. She just finished her freshman volleyball season. She's playing Division II volleyball at Hawaii Pacific.
Hey, back on island.
Back on island. And my son is 15. He's a sophomore here at Sarah.
Love that.
Yep.
I'm going to ask a follow-up because I'm curious how that then aligns with your advice and wisdom for your student athletes. And I ask that because in my household, the two non-negotiables are you're playing 3 sports a year and you're going on the wilderness trip. Outside of that, we can talk about whatever you want. And when I'm talking to our kids about trying to get them to try other things, right, I'm leading from that same place. I'm like, look, you don't live with me, but please understand that my logic comes from here.
Yeah.
Just so that they know what side of the spectrum I'm coming on. So now you've moved over here and you've got a specialist who's playing college volleyball. How do you now find that balance as you're coaching the athletes at the school to stay engaged when maybe they want to tap out early?
So to go backwards, right? Like I want them to try everything that they possibly can, but I don't want them to overextend themselves, I guess would be the kind of direction. And so I think when I'm talking to the student athletes is, yeah, when you're a freshman, you should try everything you possibly can, right? Yes, play football and then play basketball and then do baseball or do volleyball or run track or whatever the case may be. Try it all. Get involved in as much as you possibly can, right? But if that becomes too much down the road, then maybe it becomes a situation where you have to now start to reevaluate that and you go from 3 sports to 2 sports because, you know, that's just what's best for you as an individual. I think it's all individualized. I think there's a lot of kids out there that could potentially play 3 sports and maybe should be playing 3 sports. But again, I'll say it like our section and our state and our league and the sports programs and how the seasons are It doesn't allow for it.
So
So,
you're right. It's individualized. And what I left out is my caveat in that is through your sophomore year. And then
yeah,
if you want to be elite at something, we can discuss what that recipe looks like and whether you want to buy into that. And none of them have wanted to do that. They just want to be seasonal athletes.
yeah. And mine, both of them have bought into that,
Yeah.
like exclusively.
Because
So,
it's a different playbook. It just is.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, and I think that's the biggest thing that I take away from it is what works for one maybe doesn't work for the rest. It's a very fluid type of situation for anybody. And I don't think a coach, whether that be a club coach, a private coach, a high school coach, I don't think any coach out there should be the one that says, no, this is what you have to do.
And on that, and we'll wrap with this. When I have conversations with our kids that come in and they're like, hey, I want to do this. Let's just say they're a soccer player and they're like, hey, I want to go play club soccer. I don't want to play football this year. And it's cool. Have you talked to your soccer coach about that? Huh? Why would I do that? I'm like, lots of reasons. That's the guy that controls your playing time. And it's like, at a bare minimum, all of the mentors you have in your life that you respect their opinion, you should be having this conversation with them. And then you find your truth within those conversations. But if you're not having those conversations and you're making your decisions in a vacuum, or because to your point, this particular coach said you should do X and you didn't bother to go validate that, you're missing the process. The decision isn't what's important as we raise young people. It's the process for getting to said decision.
Absolutely. 100%. I would agree wholeheartedly that there has to be a process to coming to a decision. And there has to be multiple conversations that lead to a certain decision.
Right.
It shouldn't just be X told me, and so that's just the way it's going to be. 100%, all the time, having those conversations. And at every parent meeting that I have with the new families, the new welcome families in the fall, and with the freshman families, it's you never know what might work out.
Correct.
Don't put yourself in a situation. And if one thing doesn't work out, if one door closes, look at the other 4 doors that may open.
Yeah.
And don't be afraid to walk through one of those doors.
Yeah. One of my good buddies said on the pod years ago, is closed doors are a blessing. And it's, you just got to figure out how you want to frame things.
100%.
Yeah. All right, Coach. Appreciate you taking the time, man. It's been fun.
My pleasure. Anytime. Look forward to seeing you out there, and we'll catch up soon.